Okay, so in this lecture, we are going to commit the offsets manually. So for this, as I said, we need to add a property, and that property is going to be consumer.config.enable auto commit, and we'll set it to false. This is to disable auto commit of offsets because we want to know when these offsets get committed manually. Okay, now if we go to our while loop and we pull the records and we loop over all the records, basically we can see that we insert them into Elasticsearch, and at the end when we exit the for loop, this is where we want to consume and commit the offsets. So first of all, let's do logger.info received, and then we'll just say how many messages we received. So records.count plus records. So we received how many records? Now we're going to loop all over these records, and every time we loop over these records, we're going to sleep a little bit. So this time I'll just sleep for 10 milliseconds. And then finally, I'm going to say logger.info committing the offsets. Here we'll add consumer.commit sync to commit the offset in a synchronous manner. And then we'll say logger.info offsets have been committed. And just for fun, we're going to also do a thread.sleep for 1000 milliseconds just to give it a chance to sleep a little bit. Okay, so here's the idea. Here we have added a consumer.commit sync, but you see this has happened right after we've dealt with this entire loop. Also, to decrease the amount of data I'm receiving, I will say consumer.config.max pull records, and I will say just 20. So we only get 20 records, or even 10 to make it even less. Okay, we should receive only 10 records at a time. So let's go ahead and run this code and see what happens. I'm going to run this, and we can look at the log. So here we go. We have received 10 records, and they're being inserted one by one right here. So they're being inserted in real time. And then when we're done inserting 10 records, the offsets are being committed, and then they've been committed. And then we receive another 10 records that our program will basically insert into Elasticsearch. So now we're just waiting for Elasticsearch to happen. And here we go, more data is being inserted. So I'll just stop this and we can have a look at what happened. So here, by setting max pull records config to 10, we guarantee that we receive a maximum of 10 records. Then each record gets inserted into Elasticsearch. And so this is what happens here. When the for loop is over, we go into committing offsets. So here we go. And then the offsets are being committed, and then they've been committed. So we get the log offsets have been committed. And then we sleep, and we go back to the beginning of the loop where we get another 10 records and received and repeat this. Now let's look about whether or not that worked. So the last offset we've committed is basically this one. This is where we've been running up until. And we've read this thing that ends in 720. So if we restart our consumer, we expect to be restarting at this offset 720 and reprocess these 4 messages. And that's because our processing has been idempotent. This is fine. We can definitely deal with this. Finally, we can verify that our consumer has had the right commit offsets by doing Kafka consumer groups. And we do the bootstrap servers, which is 127.0.0.1.9092. And the topic, the group ID we're considering is called Kafka demo Elasticsearch. And finally, we want to do a describe on it. So I'll describe this. And bootstrap servers is wrong. It's bootstrap server. Enter. And here we get an idea so that our partition number 5 has been having a current offset of 20, which is exactly the number of messages that we've successfully read and committed, while the other partitions have not been read yet. So as you can see here, our commit offsets has been effective on partition number 5, and that's super awesome. So that's how you get started with your consumer. And as you can see, it was quite slow. So in the next lecture, we'll have to think about how do we improve the performance of our consumer to make it way more efficient.